are you? And where are you going? What do you want?
Hello and welcome to People Making Money. I'm your host, Kevin Bemmel, and I'm here every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time to talk about job hunting, starting and running a business, building wealth, all of those aspects of our financial lives that in many ways enable us to deal with all the other parts of our lives is really what it comes down to. And so today I'm very anxious to jump right in talking to my guest. So John, there I go. I'm going to mangle your last name. Solleder.
Close enough. Solleder. That's close enough.
Solleder. Okay. John Solleder is a new friend of mine. We just met, I think, a week or two ago. John was watching an episode of the show and reached out to me. And the first time we spoke, it was like we had known each other for, since we were kids kind of thing. And we were talking about business and what it takes to be successful. So I said, John, I got to get you on an episode of my show to share some of this with the viewers and listeners, because, John, if you saw any of the social media posts, John is a serial entrepreneur. Has been starting and running businesses his whole career. John is around the same age as me. He'd be like my younger brother a little bit, I think. And you will see John. I'm sure he'll mention it, but John is originally from New Jersey. So I'm telling you, people from New Jersey, they're real people. So John, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Well, Kevin, thanks so much for that nice introduction and your invitation. Yeah, I do love your show, and you know what? It's a little different because it's giving people some things that they can do in this current economic environment that we're in. Whether it's good or bad, I don't even know. I mean, I look at some of the numbers and they look good. I look at some of the other numbers, they don't. And then you listen to Powell, and then you listen to Bush, Trump, and then you listen to. So who knows if it's good or not? But at the end of the day, what I've found throughout my 42 plus year career working for myself is generally it's up to me to make it the best that I can make it, given all of the circumstances that may exist. And the less excuses that we make for our situation, the better off we're going to be.
Yeah. And I think right there, that's the core philosophy. So before we get into your businesses, and if you're willing to, and I don't think I asked you this question when we were talking before, but if you're willing, when you were a kid, right, what did you think you wanted to do when you grew up, right? I know for me, I was going to be an astronaut. Of course, every kid, I think my age, wanted to be an astronaut, right? But never, ever in my childhood did I think, when I grow up, I want to be an independent trustee and administrate trusts and estates. I would not have even known that, right? But I always start out asking my guests this question because it's so interesting where we thought we wanted to go and most of the time where we ended up.
Well, believe it or not, my plan was to be a sports writer. I always thought Oscar Madison was the coolest guy on TV way back. You remember The Odd Couple? Some people hopefully do.
Yes.
One of the
Tony Randall and
they were so good. Jack Klugman.
Jack Klugman. Yep.
I played Little League Baseball with Jack's nephew, Mark, believe it or not, like 100 years ago in New Jersey. But and Jack even came to a couple games, had a cigar the whole time. But
wow.
But I always thought I loved sports. I loved competing in them. And at the same time, I thought, what would a great career going to ballparks or rinks or whatever you were assigned to. I didn't care what the sport was, by the way.
Right.
And that was my goal. And then my senior year of college, I had my first offer financially. And I realized I was going to make a whopping $12,000 a year. And I was going to have to move to Delaware. I had been offered a job in Delaware from a high school wrestling magazine down there. And I owed so much in student debt that I said, this just isn't practical. $1,000 a month less taxes, and you still got to eat. You still got to, live somewhere.
Right.
So that plan changed, ironically, really, really quick.
Uh-huh.
I figured out that was not the life I was gonna have. Now as an old guy, if somebody offered me that job and I could go to like every major league ballpark and report on a baseball game or something, I'd probably do it for free. But I don't want to advertise that somebody might offer me that job.
Right. Well, on the other hand, you might want to, when I was a kid, and in junior high school, did a lot of acting, dramas and musicals, and I was not the sports guy. I was the choir and theater guy, and getting ready to go to college. My friends said, so where are you going? I'm going to USC. What are you going to study? Oh, I'm going to study architecture. Architecture? Why are you going to study architecture? Why aren't you going into acting? And I would say, don't really want to starve for a living.
Well, I dated an actress in New York who was actually very successful. She was actually in Phantom for a lot of years. So I got to know a lot of professional actors and actresses. And yeah, I mean, they're always one day away from losing a job and having to be waitress versus actress or
Right.
actor. And I don't make light of it. These are super talented, super dedicated people. I love
Mhm.
their dedication is every bit as high as a professional athlete.
Oh, for
But,
sure.
but boy, what a tough way to make a living.
Yeah, and a couple of the guys I went to high school with are household names. I mean, I knew him as Tony Edwards, but Anthony Edwards, who was Goose and Top Gun, and he was on ER and all that, right? He's a friend of mine. We went to high school together. We were at USC at the same time. Um, Eric Stoltz, I went to school with. So some of my friends, did break through, but when I looked at what they had to go through and really how lucky they got, which was what allowed them to be successful. And I'm looking at myself, I'm like, yeah, that's
Yeah.
I'm willing to work hard, but to work hard and not have a sense that with the hard work, success is essentially inevitable. And that's the challenge. It doesn't matter how talented you are in that business. I think this is true of sports as well. So, you can be a super talented athlete, but if you don't get the breaks or whatever, you're not going to make it into the NBA or whatever, right?
It's always important to have a backup plan. I've worked with a lot of athletes over the years because my other passion besides business is athletics.
Hmm.
And I've always told them have a backup plan. And one of the young guys that I mentored who now lives in Houston, he called me the other day and he said that he had gotten hurt playing hockey a couple of years ago, and he said, "Thank God I listened to you." And he was always cracked the books, really good student. He's doing really well now in the construction trade. He's probably going to move to West Virginia to start an HVAC company and roofing company with a partner. And anyway, he was bouncing some ideas off me. But point being, however good you are, and we saw this in the NBA Finals the other night. This player from Indiana, Halliburton. I mean, the poor guy tore his Achilles,
Oh,
so he's out for a year, and he may be able to return. Okay, now, okay, granted, they have insurance, and I hopefully he's put away a few bucks, and he made it to that top level. But what if he was in high school or college and that happened?
right,
Or he
right,
was in his first practice in the NBA and he hadn't signed a long-term deal or something, right?
right.
So, look, in all walks of life, having a plan B is fundamental.
Mhm.
And one of the things I preach to people is, look, multiple sources of income, multiple streams of income, call it what you want. Have a plan B, have a side hustle, have a side gig, have something that you're working on while you're doing your primary thing. So you've got that secondary backup plan just in case. Or maybe it's what you really want to do when you are in a position to retire or leave what you want to do. So you
Mhm.
do something that you really want to do that you can throw yourself in and be passionate about.
Yeah. So how did you make that pivot from deciding, okay, I'm not going to be a sports writer? So then, now the whole wide world is open to you, right? And so how did that transition work?
I had a crazy 60 days of my life that happened from April to June of 1983. And if I can, Kevin, take a couple minutes to tell this story. It's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So what happened was that same week I had competed. There's a sport called sambo. It's Russian wrestling. It's a combination of wrestling and judo. And I had competed, and that's where I had that job offer. Believe it or not, was from a gentleman at this meet down in
Oh.
Virginia. We were at George Mason University, and I competed, and I took fifth in the country, and made like a national team. I could have went to Europe and et cetera, et cetera. But I was kind of on the fence. What am I going to do? I had considered the Marine Corps. Come from a long line of not only Marine but also Army veterans in both sides of my family. I had considered that, but I really, like I said, I really had my heart set on being a sports writer. My degree was going to be in communication from Seton Hall University, South Orange, New Jersey. Go Pirates! And anyway, our claim to fame is basketball. Actually, education is our claim to fame, I should say. My cousin runs a nursing school there. She get very upset if she heard me say basketball as opposed to education.
Well, the Seton Hall is well known. I mean, their sports claim to fame is certainly basketball. So
yeah, that's about it. A little bit of baseball, but yeah, basketball's the thing. But anyway, so I'm about to graduate, and a buddy of mine who I had wrestled with in high school was a couple years older than me, and he had gone to Lehigh University in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and had graduated. And he came into the gym I was working out at one day, and we started talking. And he says, "Look, you could start a business like I started for $32." Well, the good news was it was $32. The bad news was I didn't have $32. I said, "Tom, if I could write you a check, and you can hold it for a few days, I'll be able to cover it," because I was selling health club memberships part-time at that same facility for another friend of mine. And anyway, long story short, he said, "Sure." Well, what happened over the next 30 days were two things. Number one, I went out and I made $800 selling that product.
wow.
When $800, you keep in mind we're the same age, Kevin, right? $800 in 1983 is about $2,500 today.
Yeah, for sure.
Also, though, people didn't have credit cards. So when I said I made $800, it was like I opened my wallet and there were dead American presidents in there. Like there was real money in there, right?
Yeah, yeah.
By the way, I probably had more money in there today than I do now. I got all these credit cards, I think I have a $100 bill in credit cards. But anyhow, so I made real money. But what happened was, and this was fortuitous, Ronald Reagan was our commencement speaker on May 18th. So I started this business April 18th. Reagan speaks at our commencement May 18th of 83. And Reagan made two great points that day. One was, of course, the fact that he actually predicted that what would eventually happen with the wall, that it would come down because the East Germans wanted what the West Germans had in terms of product, food, technology, all the things that people in that part of the world were deprived of. But across this wall, gee, they're having a good time. Over here we're struggling. So he predicted that, and he talked about the fact that capitalism, while not perfect, okay, it's still the ism that frees people, frankly. Okay. It still does to this day, and it always will. But second to that, what stayed with me all of these many years was when he talked about the fact that in 1932, height of the Depression, he goes back to Illinois where he'd been a lifeguard the previous summer, graduated college just like we all were that day. And by the way, 1983, the economy's still struggling. I mean, it's still in trouble. And anyway, he said, I went back, he said, and I started to talk to a successful businessman who he had known. And he asked for some advice. He said, "Look, I'm a young guy. I'm a college graduate. Kind of what should I do?" And this businessman gave him great advice. He said, "You should find a business that you are passionate about and then find a mentor to teach you that business." Well, in Reagan's case, obviously it was broadcasting, and it was a minor. He got to do the sports writer thing, kind of. He was a sports broadcaster for the Chicago Cubs affiliate. Somebody heard him from Westinghouse. They moved him out to California, and as they say, the rest is history. But more than that, Reagan touched on the fact of mentorship. And all of a sudden, as I'm still looking for a job, right? I've got a resume that has my name and my phone number. There was no email, text, or other things today that's probably on a kid's resume, right? And I got this piece of paper with my name and my phone number. And as I'm still looking for a job, I start to realize I made $800 in 30 days, having really no idea what I'm doing. What if I looked at the people mentoring me in that business and said, let me learn everything I can from them? And then once again, something happened about 30 days later, give or take. It wasn't necessarily June 18th. I don't remember the date. But I went to my first ever real business meeting in Hartford, Connecticut.
Hmm.
And I did not own a suit or tie, by the way. I had to actually buy one. Okay.
Oh.
But I had $800. By that point, I had about $2,000 I had made from that business. So I was like, I could buy I think you could buy a decent suit for $100.
Yeah.
Anyway, I
Like
went to
that.
this meeting, and the fella doing the meeting said these words that have also stayed with me, and I can recite them. If you woke me up from a cold sleep at 3 a.m., I could recite them. What he said was, for things to change, you have to change. And for things to get better, you have to get better.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, whoa. I'm still blaming kind of the fact that, I'm born on the wrong side of the street. My father was an immigrant. My mother was an immigrant.
Mm-hmm.
They don't speak the language that well. My dad's a blue collar guy, worked hard, okay, made a decent living, but at the end of the day, wasn't a lot of extras in our
Mm-hmm.
house.
Yeah.
And I'm blaming them, and I'm saying, I'm blaming everything. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of looking in the mirror and saying, for things to change, I had to change. I had to get better. So all of a sudden, I hear this guy say those words. Turns out Jim Rohn, the great Jim Rohn, wrote
Right.
them.
Right.
All of a sudden, I said, you know what I've got in my wallet? Besides some money, I've got a library card. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to start going to the public library at least 1 or 2 afternoons a week. And everything I can find on self-development, personal development,
Mm-hmm.
business, I'm going to read. And I
Mm-hmm.
start to trip across stuff, okay, by people like Og Mandino, greatest salesman in the world, James Allen, As a Man Thinketh, okay, Mary
Mm-hmm.
Kay, the great Mary Kay from Dallas here.
Uh-huh.
Some of the things that she had written on small business, and I can't remember them all, but I just became a sponge
Mm-hmm.
for everything that could build John.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily build that business, but build John, because if I built John, I could build any business.
Right.
The business is irrelevant. I'll figure out, the mechanics of the business, okay? But at
Mm-hmm.
the end of the day, if I'm not in a good place mentally,
Right.
no business succeeds. If I am in a good place mentally, any business can succeed. I just have to figure out, the mechanics and what works, what doesn't work, trial and error, all that kind of stuff that we do in every business out there. But that's what happens. So in about that 60-day period,
Mm-hmm.
okay, the man upstairs kind of shone his light on me and said, hey, I'm gonna show you some things. What you do with them are up to you, right? To quote Rohn again, right?
Right.
Seed, soil, sunshine, rain, miracle of life. Now what are you gonna do with it?
Yeah.
And that's what happened. And that was 42 years ago, and I'm 64 years old now. I'm still going strong, still teaching some of this stuff to people all over the world, doing podcasts, writing books, educating, coaching, mentoring, doing whatever I possibly can. Plus, I've got a number of businesses that we're involved with.
So, and this is one of the things that intrigued me the first time we spoke is how similar our life paths were. Because, like, now my father was an engineer, so he was, I guess, a white collar guy. But my dad, really, he loved the part of engineering he loved was the tinkering, right? That's what he wanted to be doing. And when I decided to go out on my own it was around 1985. And now for the first time I'm responsible for making, for selling and making it all work, and I'm failing at it. I'm not making sales, whatever, and I realized I've got to learn what I need to do. So I read Tommy Hopkins' book, and then I got his tapes, and I can't think of the name. There was a woman who was a very well-known sales trainer at the time. I got her tapes, all the Earl Nightingale stuff, and driving around in my car. This was when you only had cassette tapes, right? This is before, CDs. And I was always listening to, one of these tape programs over and over again, like drilling this stuff into my head. And I remember, after doing that for probably a year, and improving for sure. And I'm thinking to myself, but why am I still not getting the success that I wanted? And I realized something that it sort of came to the fore, and that is, look, I love my father. He was a great guy, but he came from a very sort of populist perspective that taught me if someone was wealthy, they had become wealthy through nefarious means,
Mm-hmm.
right? And here I would be going and talking to people. I was, in my mid 20s, and I'm saying to them, let me manage your building that's worth, $1 million, $2 million, right? And I think they could feel from me that I thought, unsaid was, you crook, right? Not an effective sales pitch, right? And so it really took, I started listening to Zig Ziglar, right? And Zig Ziglar is probably the genius in helping people change their perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the day he died, because I there were some people who were also Ziglar fans like me, and we were all mourning the passing of this great man. But so much of our success happens, as Ziglar, between our two ears, and all the impediments to it as well, right? They're happening between our two ears, and if this is, I think, what's so hard for people to comprehend, is the thing that's most likely holding us back is ourselves.
Exactly. Why does one person in business become a Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk? Both come from fairly normal backgrounds. Neither one of them came, like I mentioned a client before that I won't mention on your show, whose family were billionaires. Well, he should be successful. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, he's gonna write a check for any amount of money. Okay. But you look at whether it's those guys, Mark Cuban, whose dad was a bus driver in Pittsburgh. I mean, there's so many examples of people who've had tremendous wealth bestowed upon them, first generation. In our lifetime, we probably have more first generation billionaires now, I think, than we've ever had. I may or may not be right about that, but I think it's a fair argument. And you look at the businesses that these guys have started that we've all benefited from. It's not like they got it all and it was nefarious. It was like, no, they didn't get it all. They got their share, certainly.
Right.
But at the end of the day, if they created tens of thousands of jobs that increased the tax base in different communities around not only our country, but around the world, well, shouldn't they be able to make that kind of money? Because the trickle down, is really good for, if a billionaire creates how many millionaires, and millionaires create how many 100,000, I don't think 100,000 heirs is a term, but you know what I'm saying.
We know what you mean, right?
And what happens to the tax base when all of a sudden, for example, Amazon opens a facility and they employ 1,000 people, 2,000 people, 10,000 people in a community that then turn around and make good wages, that have to pay taxes in those communities. And now all of a sudden you have better little league fields, better ambulance corps, etc. To me, that's why business people are my heroes, not athletes, not entertainers. Okay.
Yeah, agreed.
I don't disrespect those people. They've worked hard too. But at the end of the day, those business people, the trickle down of success is other people being able to eat. It's a good thing at the end of the day. And sometimes what happens, because I was raised the same way, by the way. My father was a union guy all the way, and the contractors were definitely doing the wrong things, and they weren't paying enough, and blah, blah, blah. Right. Well, then you get on the other side of it as a business person yourself, and you start to realize the risk is all on the guy that owns the business. You get to go home at 4:00 in the afternoon and, watch a ball game and eat dinner with your family. That guy's 9, 10 o'clock at night. His phone's still ringing.
Right.
And if he owes money, it might be ringing at 11 or 12 o'clock at night. Right. So, you just realize both sides of it. But yeah, to me, the business people have always been my heroes, and I look at the businesses that, Ray Kroc built, for example, or Mary Kay. And there's so many examples, once again, of people who are deceased that built great businesses that are still going. I think of, Jim Collins' great book, Built to Last. When he talks about, building a timepiece, right, versus building, a Big Ben.
Okay? Right.
Right. Like there's a difference, right? Like what are you building? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think he used the example there of Sam Walton, for example. Walmart's bigger today than it was when Sam was alive.
Right.
So he built it right. Walt Disney built it right. Others built it right. And they built it not only for themselves because they were only going to live a certain amount of time as a mere mortal, but they built a great enterprise that's lived beyond them, not only for their family's benefit, but for so many other families' benefits.
Yeah. Well, I remember this was probably the mid 90s. and business was doing pretty well, and so wanted to do something to give back to the community. So I became a fundraiser for the Jewish community here in LA, and through that I got recruited to be a fundraising trainer across the country by a wonderful woman by the name of Anita Jacobs. She was the national fundraising trainer for the Jewish Appeal at the time. And so she sent me to Seattle to do a training up there. And this is my first time in Seattle, which it's a beautiful city. And I'm walking around and I see all these people with these jean shirts, that were so popular at the time. And over the breast pocket, it says FUIFV. And I saw a lot of these shirts, and I'm thinking to myself, what the heck is this like some kind of club, or is this a business that I'm not familiar with, right? And so I went and did the training, and there were a number of people there who were learning how to fundraise, and they would say things like, well, I'm kind of unemployed now. And I'm kind of like, you're kind of unemployed now, but like this guy's talking about buying a helicopter, It's like, and I'm like, what is going on here? So the fellow who was my main contact there, he's taking me back to my hotel, and I'm like, what's going on here? First of all, what's the FUIFV thing? He said, those are people who work at Microsoft, and their pension is vested now. So the FU is obvious, FU. Yeah. IFV, I'm fully vested. So these are people who are worth, and again, this is back in the 90s. They're worth at least like $5 to $7 million, yep. Right? And they're all over the place, right? So, whatever people say about Bill Gates, he built a company that made, I don't even know how many millionaires, right? And then these people turned around. A lot of them worked, doing charitable work and this and that. So this is really the engine that makes things happen in our communities, I think. Right? What would happen?
You look at UPS. The day UPS went public, most of their drivers who had been with them for, I don't remember how many years, but most of their drivers with any kind of seniority that day became a millionaire on paper.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, and that's a great story. When a working guy gets to be, or a working woman gets to be a millionaire because they stayed with a company, they were loyal, they worked hard, they deserve it. They certainly deserve it. But it's a good thing. And somebody else might look and go, yeah, but the CEO made $100 million. Yeah, but if the CEO guided the process and all those people became millionaires, what are you complaining about?
Right, and look at how he took care of his people.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So you mentioned some of the great writer, Jim Rohn. So who do you recommend people look to today for the kind of guidance that you and I, found so crucial to the success that we gain? And I'm gonna let you think about that for a minute while I play a spot from one of our sponsors.
Sure. Okay.
We'll be right back. When life brings unexpected changes, managing inherited property shouldn't add to your stress. Magnum Properties specializes in probate and trust real estate management. We handle the complexities while you focus on what matters most. From property maintenance to tenant relations, from legal compliance to maximizing value, we're your trusted partner through every step. Magnum Properties, Inc., turning property challenges into peace of mind. Call us today at 213-264-4396 or visit magnumprops.com. So we're back with People Making Money. I'm your host, Kevin Bemmel, and my guest is John Solleder. Did I get it right this time?
You got it.
I got it. Okay, good. And we are talking about how to be successful in business, how to be successful in life. And the question that I asked John just before the break was, to whom should people look today for the kind of guidance that John and I have been talking about in the show so far, to lead you to success, to give you the information, the inspiration that we all need in order to be successful?
Kevin, that's great. It's a great question because we know all the luminaries, right? And most of them are dead. I mean,
Mhm.
Jim's dead, Zig's dead. You go to Earl Nightingale. What a great voice.
Mhm.
How would you like that voice? I mean, what a great voice.
Yes.
He was almost killed in World War II. Most people don't know that. He was
No,
very,
I
very
didn't know
close to
that.
being killed. Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
And so a lot of those voices are gone now. Fortunately, they live on YouTube. Like
Mhm.
I still listen to Jim Rohn on a regular basis. I knew Jim. Okay, I didn't know him well. I had lunch with him here in Dallas one time, and it was funny. I had lunch with him, Ron Reynolds, who had helped him write The Seasons of Life, and a guy named Charlie Regis, who had founded a network marketing company here in Dallas. And those two guys were in their 50s, and we finished lunch. And I'll answer your question in a second here. But
Mhm.
Jim has his glasses propped up on his forehead like he always did. I don't think he ever
Mhm.
wore the things, by the way. Every time I saw him, they were up here.
Right.
And anyway, he looks at these two guys, and he looks back at me, and he says, and he always call you by your last name, Mr. Solleder. I don't think I can help these two guys. And I knew exactly what he meant. Jim was religious about write everything down because you're never going to remember it. Now
Mhm.
in my 30s, then my memory was pretty good. In my 60s, I can tell you, yeah, it's not as good. Okay.
Right.
But anyway, I ran to my car. You would have thought I was Usain Bolt. I ran to my car, I ran back and get my day timer. And I start making notes. And he goes, John, relax. You don't have to write down everything I say. He goes, the point I made is, what if this waiter comes over and says something so profound, something so life changing, something so business changing? And you go, wow, that was great. And you don't have the ability to record it. This is before cell phones, by the way. I mean, cell
Mhm.
phones existed, but you couldn't do what you can today.
Right.
Anyway, he said, what if he says that and you get home tonight and you start thinking, that waiter really made a great point. I need to go back there tomorrow and say, hey, waiter, what did you say exactly? You get back here tomorrow, the waiter quit. The waiter got fired. The waiter didn't come to work today. They won't give you his name and phone number. Or better yet, the waiter's here and he looks at you with a blank stare and says, I don't know. It's gone forever. But if you wrote it down, guess what? It's yours.
Mhm.
And when Jim said that, this was in about 1992, by the way, maybe
Mhm.
93, something like that, early 90s. And it just stuck with me. I became very, very, very good at taking notes and diarizing everything that made any sense. And I've got, if you were in my messy office here, you'd see I literally have day timers galore, notes everywhere. I throw nothing out. I drive my wife crazy because I don't know where there's that one idea, that one concept that's a game changer. So let me answer your question. We live in an age where we all have to be able to do two things: pivot and be agile.
Mhm.
The pivot came, like for me, for example, the pivot came during COVID. I had written two books. This one that came out in December of 2019. And
Mhm.
this one that came out in February 2020. Now, if you were planning to have bad timing to write books, that would have been the time. Because I do so much public speaking, I got 60 cities I'm going to be in over the next 12 months with my network marketing business as my primary business. But oh, by the way, when I'm in Cincinnati, I've got friends. They are going to have me come speak to the Rotary Club. They're going to have me come speak here or there. They're their network marketing business, etc. Or Chicago or London for that matter, all over the world. And my books are in Spanish, so I also have a big tour coming up in Mexico, Peru, Colombia, and the Dominican Republic.
Wow.
Like I got all this stuff's all on paper, 12 months where I'm going to be, and all of a sudden you start seeing the news and these people in China are dying, and all of a sudden they're dying in LA, and people are wearing masks, and it hits Dallas, and the food stores are closed, and oh wait a minute, what's going on here? Well, anyway, this is where the pivot came. Now think of a pivot, folks, like basketball. My back's to the basket, and my teammate throws me the ball. I got to pivot to turn around and throw the ball in the hoop. I pivoted to do what? Podcasts,
Mhm.
like what we're doing right now. Okay.
Mhm.
I created a podcast because at least I could reach people.
Right.
And by the way, they wanted to be reached because they had nothing else to do. So it was actually good timing in that respect. Wouldn't want to repeat it. I'm sure you all wouldn't either. But where's the agility come? The agility came about 12, well, not even 12 months ago, where I recognized that I needed to understand AI and apply it to my business.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to study it, and I got a mentor in it, a guy out in Las Vegas that I met ironically that's very, very good at it. Who's a little younger than me, not much, a couple of years. And he started to teach me about AI and how to use it for my podcasts, for my network marketing business, for my writing, et cetera, et cetera. And I started to use it. So that's where the agility comes. The agility being able to move this way or this way. So
Mm-hmm.
don't think if you're listening to Kevin's show that, hey, I don't understand all that. I don't want to understand all that. I'm going to do, one of these deals.
Mm-hmm.
Don't do that. You can understand it. Do you have to become a machine learning engineer? No, I'm certainly not. But you better know how to use it and apply it, because it's the time we're living in. To quote our friend Bill Gates again, Gates said 25 years ago there were two types of businesses: those on the internet and those out of business. Well, I believe now AI is the same. Those that are using AI properly to do all the stuff you don't want to do, because it can do a multitude of functions for you.
Mm-hmm.
So you do what you do best. If that's selling, like I do for a living, or you do for a living, Kevin,
Mm-hmm.
only we can sell our client. They don't want to talk to a computer. But a lot of the preparation, it can be done. So to answer your question, okay, people like Russell Brunson. Now, I don't know Russell Brunson. He doesn't send me a commission check for saying this, but Russell Brunson has been ahead of the curve in terms of not only developing funnels, but also teaching other people how to develop funnels for their respective businesses, whatever that business happens to be. If you're in real estate, if you're in network marketing, if you're in insurance, real estate, automobile, whatever it is, start with a lot of people and funnel it down so you're only talking to the people that actually have a sincere interest in what it is you're selling. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing. Russell Brunson would be one. Tony Robbins, I think, to his credit, he stays ahead of the curve. That guy
Mm-hmm.
stays not only relevant, but he stays on top of his game.
Yep.
Tony has become, a pivoter and agility guy over the years, right? Because the
For
world
sure.
changed for him like it has for all of us. Tony is one. Those would be two names that come to mind. There's certainly others. Okay, there's some that I don't know. Some of the younger folks that are doing things. But at the end of the day, follow the people who are contemporary in terms of technology.
Mm-hmm.
Technology is a game changer, and it makes your life a lot easier. By the way,
For sure.
I was talking to a friend of mine in Manila this morning, and I was referencing the years that I spent with Metropolitan Life years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time I was with MetLife, the top sales rep was a Persian gentleman with a very funny, really not a funny name. It sounds funny when I say it. Mehdi Fakazadi.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I remember I wrote a policy at 5:30 in the morning on a contractor. And I came to the office at about 6:30 to submit the application to those days you had to submit it to the secretary. There's no internet.
Right.
And anyway, so I came, do the paperwork, leave it on her desk and leave. All of a sudden, I hear some noise in the coffee area, and I realize that Mady is there.
Mm.
And Mady's about 60 at that time, by the way. I'm about 23, 24.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, I went, Mr. Mady, good morning. How are you, sir? Good. Like, what are you doing up here so early? He goes, I went out, I had breakfast with a friend, and I wrote a policy. Here's the number one guy at that time in the Metropolitan Life Insurance Company, even then a $140 billion company, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we got talking, and I rarely talked to him. I was a little intimidated, to be honest with you. I mean, the man was a legend then.
Mm-hmm.
And long story short, he said something that stayed with me. And he said, I said, why do you still work this hard? And he said, to be honest, when I came from Iran, between the language barrier, new business, I think he was an engineer in Iran. He may have been an attorney. I don't remember.
Mm-hmm.
But he was a professional, but he couldn't do that in the States, couldn't get licensed. Right. And so long story short, he said to me, he said, business is easy now. He was working off a lot of referrals and everything else. But in other words, he knew what he was doing. So I look at somebody my age now. Well, now I know what I'm doing. Now, that doesn't mean that I have the expertise in every technology that comes along. I don't. Right. I'm not a technological person. I mean, there's apps on my phone. I have no idea what they do. But I'll tell you what, the ones that I do know what they do, I use them every single day. Okay. Mm-hmm. So that's my message to anybody who's maybe over 50 listening to your show today, Kevin, is Don't be intimidated by it. Embrace it. Use it. There's plenty of ways to learn it. There's guys like Brunson. There's guys like Robbins. There's others that can help guide the process. There's different people who are authority figures
Mm-hmm.
in AI, for example, that are popping up. And don't worry that they're 25 years old.
Right.
You know what that you know what that tells me? They've spent 17 hours a day on the internet for the last 15 years. Good.
Right. Exactly.
You know, I'll tell you something else I'm doing. I've actually created with a partner a clip farming army. Now, for those of you not familiar with clip farming is those little clips you get on your phone that are 6 to 15 seconds. Okay, advertising variety of different things. They're like really short ads. They're a really short ad, right? And we've actually developed a clip farming army to basically go out and promote varieties of different businesses that we're working with, as an example. Well, if you told me even 2 years ago I would be engaged in a business like that, I would say you're insane. I don't even know. I didn't know what clip farming was, by the way. As a matter of fact, most of your listeners right now are Googling it because they don't know what.
First time I've heard of it. So yeah.
So it's called clip farming, and we're working with a lot of doctors, believe it or not, that need to promote their practices. And a lot of doctors today, their business has changed too. A lot of them have to do consulting work to make enough money.
Mm-hmm.
So they might be in Los Angeles where you are, but they have something that they do really well. Well, they may have other doctors paying them to sit in on, I got this patient with this situation or that. We're working with a lot of those guys, believe it or not, with clip farming to help them get their story out. Because how do they meet other doctors? Yeah, they meet them locally and they meet them at seminars, but great way for them to do it. We're working with a lot of network marketing people. Same thing, to get their brands out that aren't known about it. And we're working with other people. So my point about that is be open to change and be open to the new economies that exist because of what other people have done. We didn't invent any of this stuff, but we're using it to our advantage.
Right.
And we're living at it. To me, I think we're living, I don't know if you agree with this or not, Kevin, but I think we're living at the most exciting time in human history. If we can stop killing each other and dropping bombs on each other and shooting each other and hating each other because where somebody goes to church or synagogue or mosque or what their politics are. And by the way, in our own country, if we stop killing each other because we got a D or an R after our name, and we start realizing that all of these great things exist for all of us to use, whatever your ethnicity is, whatever your religious persuasion is, right? If we do that, boy, the world's going to be a fabulous place going forward. I mean, the opportunities that exist are just so vast. Take advantage of them. And even if none of that happens, and some of the other parties don't do that, you do that. Go back to me in 1983. Be the best version of you, for your family, for your community.
Yeah. I want to emphasize one of the things you said because I think it's so important, and I'm not going to say it exactly how you did, but I think, correct me if I'm misinterpreting, and that is, be brave. I know for myself, I was never a technology guy, and yet throughout my career, as new technologies developed, I played with them until I figured out how can I use them to make my business more successful or more efficient or whatever it was. So when the fax machine came out, that was actually, for someone who, I was in the real estate business at the time, that was a tremendous time saver and money saver, because now I didn't have to messenger documents around. I could get them to people much more quickly. And then, when personal computers came around, and I could do my bookkeeping for my clients, or because I had a property management company. I just sort of jumped into it and figured it out. And I think that experimentation was as important as the eventual benefit that my business got from doing the experimentation, because now here it is, like you, I'm in my mid 60s, and all these large language models are around, and I've just I've dived into them to figure out how can I use these to enhance my business, because I figure if I don't figure it out, someone is going to, and they're going to race ahead of me, and I'm going to regret it. And look, I'm not the greatest user of AI by any stretch, but I found some ways of using it that really have made me much more productive. And I agree with, AI is going to be for this time, what the internet was for 20 or 30 years ago. And I don't think we know exactly how AI is really going to have its impact on business, but it'll come through, people like you and me and thousands of others playing with it, and eventually those models will, they will sort of bubble to the surface. Um, I used to tell people that uh, anything that um, that you know that someone else can teach you in a well organized way, that's already kind of passe, because it's gone through enough iterations that it's available now to most people. And where we want to be, this is a phrase from the military, where we want to be is closer to the tip of the spear,
Mm.
where we're kind of the pathfinders, and we're willing to suffer some failures or setbacks, or going down blind alleys and realizing we're going to have to back up and go somewhere else. If we're willing to do that, we have a much better chance at staying at the forefront of business. But it's scary, right? Because there aren't rails anymore. And when you say, you don't be afraid to try these things, that's kind of the message I take is be bold, take some risk. What is the downside to spending, like you're doing, a couple of hours, a few hours a week playing with AI just to see what you come up with? The risk is what? That you lost a few hours each week.
Exactly.
Okay, and so you don't watch as much TV or whatever. So
Exactly.
I'm curious, how does that sound to you in terms of interpreting what you
No,
said?
you're 100%. You're 100% on, and the point, I guess the other point with that is, and you mentioned Tom Hopkins earlier, right? I think
Mhm.
I shared with you last week. I met Tom years and years ago. I went to one of his seminars, and I ran into him, and we got talking in the hallway, and he said, "What's your biggest problem?" And I said, "Well, to be honest with you, I'm a little shy." Which is funny, right? Because I can do a show like this, but put me in a
Mhm.
room of 10 people, I'm like the guy in the corner looking at a cell phone, right? Like, now if somebody talks to me, I'm great. But me
Mhm.
just going over, like, initiating a conversation out of thin air, not me. And it still isn't, by the way. But in sales, I found, okay, I can find ways to get a conversation started to get to where I want it to get to. You know what I mean? We're talking
Right.
about what I want to do, which whatever it is I'm happen to be selling at that time. Anyway, so Tom wrote on the back of his business card, "Do what you fear most."
Mhm.
And I carried that around in my wallet for about 20 years, and I would look at it sometimes because it's like, okay, for me, it was just initiating conversation.
Mhm.
And it was like, okay, if that's what I'm fearing, what's the worst that they do? They say, "I don't want to talk to you. I don't like you. Go away."
Right.
I mean, come on. I mean, I've been married twice. Like, I'm used to that. Anyway, but but you know what I'm saying? It's like, okay,
Ab-
you get to a certain age, and it's like, hey, if you don't like me, you don't like me. You don't want to talk to me, don't talk to me. No big deal. Like, I've talked to there's 8 billion people on the planet, by the way. So
right.
if
Right.
somebody don't want to talk to me, believe me, there's somebody else will talk to us. I mean, don't worry about that. And anyways, but no, you're interpreting it 100% right. And like, I think self education, and there's courses you can take. One of the things, and I rarely mention this, but I'm a big believer in our community college system in this country.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay, go take a course. If you say, hey, I'm interested in AI, or I'm interested in social media, I'm interested in learning how to use Facebook and TikTok and these different things for my business.
Mhm.
Well, go online, and wherever you live, there's a community college within 20 minutes, probably. Okay,
Right.
go take a course on a Tuesday night and hear what the guy has to say or the gal has to say for a couple of hours. Pay the money. Okay, you don't have to graduate. Okay, but take
Mhm.
the course because you're interested in pursuing yourself getting better, right?
Mhm.
because that's really what is self-development, is us getting better. If you have an injury, like I was an athlete for many years, okay, I competed in judo at a high level. I've had every injury imaginable. When
Hmm.
you first get injured, okay, like that basketball player the other night. Yeah, he's in the very first baby steps of his recovery. He's got a 9-month recovery ahead of him.
Right.
It's the same thing in business. What's the first baby step? The first baby step is I'm interested. Second baby step maybe is I sign up for a course, maybe online, maybe at the community college, maybe at some other education place. Maybe I hire a kid, okay, a graduate, a recent graduate of a school. Maybe I say, hey, listen, let me call the IT department of my local college and say, hey, do you have some young graduates maybe looking to make a few dollars? I need some guidance. I'm trying to do this for my business, where maybe they can even create it for you, but they show you how they do it. Okay. Yeah, and pay them for it. I mean, there's a million different ways if you just use this. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
like
Right.
what Zig said, right? What's between your ears, right? Use this
Right.
gray matter and figure it out, right? And
Right.
how does it apply for your business? How does it apply for your life? Maybe you've got that great novel in you, and you're saying, hey, you're our age, where hey, no guarantees. Do I have 10 years, 20 years, 5 years? I don't know. So
Right.
maybe I want to write that great novel that I've had in mind, but I don't know how to do it. How can I use AI to help me do it? To do some of the research, for example. Maybe I want to write it about, I don't know. My wife and I have been watching Steve Martin with Murders in the Building, and
Oh, uh-huh.
there's a play in there about Nova Scotia, which I've been to a couple times in my life, but maybe I don't know about Nova Scotia. Well, I want to make sure that the writing is right. You know what I mean? Because I want to set it in Nova Scotia for whatever. I'm just picking that out of thin air. But
Right.
what I'm saying is, all that AI stuff will do that homework for you. You don't have to do that homework. It's going to give
Right.
you the report that you need, so you can work on maybe the plot that you need.
Right. Hmm.
Okay. And I'm using that because I've written a number of books, obviously. But at the end of the day, whatever that passion is, go
Hmm.
back to what Ronald Reagan said that businessman told him: find something you're passionate about, whatever that is. There's probably something with AI that AI can help you to accomplish what it is that you want to accomplish. Use
Hmm.
it. It's not going to use you. You got to use it.
So, and this is where your comment about this being the most exciting time, perhaps in history, to be in business, to start a business. I think this is spot on, because the resources that are available to virtually anyone. I mean, we're talking about a time when people who are homeless have a cell phone.
Yeah.
I walk around Los Angeles, where we have, I think it's something like a tenth of the homeless population in the country, and many of these people, probably most of them, have cell phones. If you have a cell phone, you have most of the knowledge of the world essentially at your fingertips. So to sort of tie into what you were saying a minute ago, I did an episode of this show 2 weeks ago, and I talked about where do you learn to start a business. And I talked about, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 different ways that you could learn. And, most people, I think, have this idea, well, I've got to go to college. I got to get a bachelor's of business administration. Or I got to get an MBA. And I don't know that that's, if you want to go to Wall Street, then that's probably the path. But if you want to be an entrepreneur, that's unlikely to be the path. And there are so many other ways to get educated now, and many of them cost little or nothing if once you have access to the internet. And I know for myself, and it was interesting what you were saying about doing research in Nova Scotia. I use chat GPT all the time to research things. Like, I wonder what's up with this, and I'll say, hey, please tell me about X, and then it gives me a thing, give me more details, it gives me more, right? It is the most targeted teaching tool that's ever existed, right? And it's all available to us. Now, you have to double check sources and all that, because they're not 100% perfect. Fine. But we all have, and I don't pay for my, chat GPT. I mean, you can, but I just use the free version. We all have available to us a one-on-one tutor that will tailor lessons exactly to what we want to learn, but we have to initiate the questions.
Well, you think about something that I mentioned earlier. 1983. Now, I was educated. I went to a great university. I graduated on time. Okay.
Uh-huh.
So I've got my degree hanging up here. You can't see it, but it's hanging in my office. Okay. So
Mine's right there.
there we go. So, but 1983, because a great entrepreneur by the name of Andrew Carnegie
Mm-hmm.
decided that he was going to give back by developing the free public library system so anybody of any means could get a library card.
Mm-hmm.
I was able in 1983 to wander into libraries in New Jersey, okay,
Mm-hmm.
at will. If I was somewhere on a sales call or whatever, I could go in and say, let me spend an hour, just pick something off the shelf.
Mm-hmm.
Ironically, I heard Dr. Ben Carson say the same thing. That's how his grandmother educated him, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay, so I wasn't crazy. Ben's a little smarter. He separated co-joined twins, but anyway. And Dr. Michael Greger, another guy that I follow in the nutrition world, same thing. You grew up going to the library, and you hear this from so many people. This trend, but anyway, today's version of that is AI.
Mm-hmm.
And the difference is you don't even have to get in a car or on your bicycle and go to the library. You might want to, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Great. I still love to go to the library. I'm a library junkie. But at the end of the day, you've got it, to your point. It's right here.
Yeah.
Everything you ever need to know about a subject. So utilize it is the point. So when I say that I believe we're living in the greatest time because of technology, if we can figure out some of the other things, okay, that still need to be figured out, okay, with repeated atrocities that seem to keep going on, okay, and I think maybe we are, but anyway, that's another podcast, I guess. But at the end of the day, let's assume that we can get to the point of being peaceful with each other in the world. We've got all these opportunities to grow. The next Amazon, the next Microsoft, the next General Electric, the next whatever, okay, is around the corner. Some 23-year-old kids working on it right now. Okay. So, once again, we've got the best ahead of us. Utilize this technology. I'll give you one other, Kevin. It might be interesting for your listeners. I was interviewing a doctor last week from down the road from you there in Palm Desert. And real interesting guy. One of these underachievers, by the way. Not only is he a dentist, but he's also got an MBA. And he also speaks 4 languages fluently. So I'm telling my son, I said, yeah, this guy's another underachiever,
Right.
And anyway, I said to him, I said, how are you using AI in your practice? And he's about our age, maybe a couple years younger. And he said, well, here's what I'm doing. And he's a dentist. He said, I use the AI to be my actuary. And I said, that's very interesting. I said, how so? He said, let's say I have a guy comes in who's a smoker. And I say, how old are you? And the guy says, I'm 60. How long have you been smoking? 40 years. Okay. Let me go to AI for a second. 40-year smoker, 60-year-old male, life expectancy. And he lets the AI show that patient what AI says. Now the doctor's not the bad guy by saying you need to give up the smokes. Now the AI is saying, look, your life expectancy is you got another 5 years if you keep puffing.
Right. Wow.
So if you love Mary or Susie or Patty or whatever the wife's name is, and the kids and grandkids, you might want to consider giving it up. You don't have to give it up. It's your choice.
Right.
But according to this, and this has a lot of data in it, it says this. I said, wow, what a simplistic but direct way of using something that just tells the person, hey, you might want to consider making a change. Okay. So that's how our friends in the medical profession are using it. And there's people using it in all different things. So look, this isn't an AI presentation, folks, but what I'm saying is if you're a little older, okay, and you say, hey, I don't know about all this stuff. I don't want to know all about this stuff. You got that thing where you got your hands over your eyes. You don't have to. Embrace it at the level you want to embrace it at. You do not need to become an expert. I'm no expert in it, but I know how to use it. And I'm using it. I mean, one of the things we do now is we do word searches, believe it or not, with other podcasts. Okay, this is something else that we're doing, right? Crazy. So I meet all these other podcasters, for example, right? Because I'm helping actually put on a podcast summit in Lubbock, Texas in the end of August, the first one we're going to do. So I need to meet other guys like you right?
Uh-huh.
And say, hey, come on down to Lubbock in late August. That's a sale in itself. Lubbock in late August. Right? Only be 117 in the shade, but
I was going to say, yeah.
but on and on. But the point is, it's a great way to meet people, and interesting people, compelling people, motivated people that you may or may not do any business with, but it's a great way to meet people that are like-minded as
Mhm.
well. So
Mhm.
enhance yourself. And once again, I'm talking like everybody listening to you is our age. I mean, I'm sure there's younger people.
Mhm.
All these things, all these skill sets apply at your age too. And frankly, if you're that older person, you're in your 70s or 80s, hey, same thing. Use it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all out there for us. Well, John, we've talked away an hour here. It zoomed by, and we could easily do another, I think, couple of hours. But
Easy.
for the sake of my viewers and listeners, I'm gonna wrap things up here. But I want to thank you for coming on the show. You'll have to have you back, and we'll talk some more. Because this is really the heart of what people making money is about. It's going through these issues and helping people to really understand what does it take to achieve success, financial success, but as each of us as individuals define it. So the way I define it, the way you define it, that's fine for each of us, but everybody's got to figure that out for themselves and then work toward it. So I can't thank you enough for coming on the show today. Have you hang tight here while I wrap things up, and then we can talk offline for a couple minutes. So folks, thank you so much for joining us. I know we had several folks watching live. That's always a treat, because I know we've got Lamon. I bet you're watching from Africa. This is right up your alley. He's a young guy who one of my most loyal viewers. So thank you all very much for joining us. This is my last show for the week. So next week on Monday at 10 a.m. is my show, Trusts and Estates Weekly. And my guest is Charity Score. Charity is going to talk about um, handling escrows of properties that are going through probate. So this can be a nightmare, and she's a pro at this. So I invite you to join me for my conversation with Charity. And then on Tuesday at 10 a.m. is my show, Business Lessons from the Military. It's the anniversary of the Battle of San Juan Hill, the battle that made Teddy Roosevelt and his Rough Riders so well known. And we're going to derive business lessons from that. So I hope you'll join me next week on Tuesday. And then a week from today will be the next episode of People Making Money. And then on Thursday of next week is my every other show, Jiggers' Place. So we'll sit back, we'll have a cocktail, and we are going to talk about, you knew I was going to do it. We're going to talk about etiquette. I've been hearing from a lot of people recently about this topic, and I think we need to get to the heart. What is this all about? This is something that John and I were taught as boys, because that's how things worked when we were kids, and you can see what a gentleman John is. And so, what is that all about? So we'll sit back and we'll have a cocktail, like I said, and we'll talk about that next Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific time. So thank you very much again for joining me, John. Again, thanks so much for coming on the show. And signing off as I always do, Marie, darling, you're my belle from the South, right? You are my belle, ever and always. Courage,